Talking about social media outsourcing today and whether or not you might be afraid to do so because of cringy content.
Yes. Yep. Meaning, I don't know if you've been through this before, but some of our listeners may have tried to hire somebody to do their social media content or help them with it. I know I've been through this. And what they wrote for you or what they created for you on your social media channel or channels, once you saw it, you were like, oh my God, that doesn't sound like me. It doesn't look like me. I've been in a situation before where the person who I hired literally made up a framework for me. They were like, I'm going to make an infographic. And they like made up a framework that isn't one that I actually teach. Um, which, some people wouldn't be bothered by, but for me, I was like, no, I already have frameworks. Thanks. Um,
That's so
so
crazy. They just made one
yeah.
up.
And I mean, listen, at the end of the day, like what we're going to talk about today is like, you're only going to get what you ask for, and you're only going to get good content from someone who's helping you with it if you are really super duper clear in like a lot of ways about what you want them to do and not do in this case, right? So like I said, I don't know about you,
Wow.
but if you're listening now or on the replay and you've ever been in a situation where you thought, oh, you know what, I could use some help. I'm going to hire someone to do some content for me on social media. And then you did that and you were like, oh my God, this is not going to work. We're going to talk about that today and like some ways to avoid that and get better results.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, I this is not something I've ever actually attempted to outsource. Um, I have attempted to outsource the design of social media, but and it didn't work for me in that season of my business because I wasn't really clear even on what my brand should represent visually.
Right.
And even since redoing my website in 2022 and like getting a new brand vibe going on, it's kind of morphing a little bit lately, even like it's starting to like become refined.
Evolve,
Yeah.
evolve. Yeah.
Yeah. Same colors and things like that, but like, changing out some fonts,
Hmm. Yeah.
changing out the presentation of what things should look like.
Yeah.
As I work with more refined brands, more grown-up feeling brands,
Yeah.
I'm finding myself drawn to those styles.
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe this conversation will help me, later
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting you said that because one of the things that I brought to talk about today, I was basically thinking, okay, if people are listening, they've experienced this, they'd like to try it again, but get better results. What can they do? And
Hmm.
so I thought of a few things that I've done that have worked really well to give me good results in this category and things my students and clients over the years have done that I wanted to share. And part of my history in online business is for about 5 years, I worked as a content manager, which
Yeah.
included content repurposing for Kay Putnam, who was and is a psychology-based brand strategist. So a lot of what I did for her and what I learned from her during that time was really geared toward making sure that someone else can show up and be your brand, is what she used to
Yep.
say. Um, and I was able to do that essentially because she was so clear with what she needed, from someone. And we were actually able to ask other people to do things too that came back, worlds better than it would have if we were just like randomly like, here's my social account. I'll give you the password. Go ahead and, schedule some things for me and later that you think might have something to do with what I do, you know?
Yeah.
Um, so it's interesting you say that because one of my things that I was going to share today is that if you have a brand book or a brand guide that you can provide people with, that's great. But a lot of times what happens is people just give the person they're outsourcing some content creation to, they give them their brand book, but it just has their colors and their fonts and maybe like a bank of their brand photos, but it doesn't give anybody the details about what should go in the copy and the content.
Mm.
So if you think about your brand strategy in a way that's not just about the colors and the fonts and things like that, and you give them some details about things like, your philosophies, your main frameworks, your offers, what they're all about, what the offer promises are, what your different spicy opinions are, things like that, all in one kind of nice little like brand book or brand guide. In addition, it's kind of like a messaging guide. In addition to the color parts and the visuals, that's one really strong strategy for being able to outsource some of this and get better results. But on the opposite side of that, you're just mentioning like the opposite, that you also want to be clear about what the visuals look like, especially if you're
Mhm.
asking them to do visuals. So I think that's a good point that you make. But that was like the first thing that I was going to talk about.
Real quick, I think
Yeah.
your collar is rubbing your mic and
Oh,
it sounds real scratchy.
oh, okay. I wonder how I can fix that without changing my outfit. How about that? Does that sound better?
Your earphones don't swap, do they?
I don't think so.
No, they only go on one side. No, it's fine. Oh, well, well.
Is
There
that
you
any
go.
better?
Yes. Oh my gosh,
Okay.
it sounds so clear now.
Oh, okay. Sorry about
It
that.
was just like scratchy. Anyways, so to add to your point of like a brand book, so I have one, but one of the things that I've always struggled with and I've always had kind of imposter syndrome around, and I've talked to one of my clients about this a lot because she does create templates and things like that for Canva for people to use, but she doesn't want to just give people templates and let them loose. She wants people to understand how to use them for their brand and make them represent what their brand should represent online and how they think it should look. This is something I've always struggled with. So if you do have a brand book, I think a good point that Jana is pointing out right now, without saying it directly, is adding pages to the brand book with example post mockups of what your content should look like.
That's a good strategy. Yep.
And if you're a brand designer and you're not doing this for your clients, I think you are failing your clients in some ways because this is going to be something, especially if they're doing it themselves, which a lot of us do. We just don't have the resources monetarily to hire high-end social media managers.
Mhm.
So empower us by creating social media posts that would be forward facing. This is what these should look like and add those to the brand books.
Yeah, that's a good idea too. Yep. Yeah, it's so interesting because my brain right now with this conversation went right for words.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably because I teach people how to write words. And
Mm-hmm.
also because one of my main social platforms these days is Threads, where there's like no visuals anyway.
No, got it.
And because I write emails, right? These are like my main places where I show up is like my blog, my emails, and Threads, really. I do have Instagram, of course, too. But you're talking about the visuals piece of it as well, which is equally important on some platforms, not Threads, but and
Yeah,
not
on
your
some.
blog, by the way, in my opinion.
A lot of people use more visual platforms as well. So, I mean, my main
Yeah,
platform that I teach on is Pinterest. It's very visual.
yeah,
But
for
like
sure.
even creating a really nice Instagram post that is cohesive to the rest of what you're doing, and you don't want it to
Hmm.
like show up one day and it just doesn't match the rest of what you're doing, and you made that one, and then people are looking at your feed and
Yeah.
quietly judging you because we're not going to tell you to your face that it looks hideous. But yeah, I know. I think design and words are both a skill that we can learn. So I know you had put together a story for one of your students.
Oh yeah.
I'd love
Think
to hear
about that
about
for a
it.
minute. Yeah. Um, yeah, so I'll give a little bit of background on it by saying that one of the main ways that I teach people to think about either outsourcing slash delegating or getting ready to be able to outsource or delegate some of their content creation is by creating a capsule content library, right? And that's what I teach inside of high leverage content. And
Yep.
so the way that I do this when I have someone, if I go through seasons where someone is repurposing my content for me, I give them the blog post that I want to repurpose the content from. And I give them an idea of what my basic system is for pulling gems out of that content and creating shorter form content from the long form content. And I say, okay, go ahead, now go ahead and do it. So I'm giving parameters instead of just saying, like, here's my social account, here's some of the stuff I've posted before, here's my brand book, go ahead and write whatever you want, because that's a mistake I made in the past, and I would end up with stuff that just wasn't. It wasn't even that it wasn't written in my style. It was like literally just like stuff that it wasn't what I believed. You know what I mean? So if you want your content to reflect your thought leadership, your short form content. I've always believed, I practice, I teach inside high leverage content that we create the long form content first, and then we let someone, if we're going to outsource or delegate, repurpose that content instead of just starting from sort of scratch or pulling things out of thin air, really, right?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so that's kind of like the one of them main strategies that I use. And so that's one of the parts of the promise of high leverage content, my program, is that you'll create high converting content, but also that gets you off the treadmill because it's easy to repurpose. Because even if you're not at the point in your business where you are delegating or outsourcing some of your content, or if you're not in a season where you're doing that, because I go through seasons with that, it makes it easier for you to actually go ahead and repurpose your content and have it be like a little bit more of a no-brainer than just having to like stare at a blank cursor, like, what should I write on Instagram today, you know?
Yeah.
Or having like a great graphic on Instagram or a great photo of you, but then like you go to write a caption and you're like, that's it, that's the caption, or like or something
Join
really
the
short.
newsletter.
Yeah, just super short. Like, sometimes it can be fun to do something short and pithy, but you don't want to do that on every caption. You want to use your caption space to actually like, build demand and build trust and persuade people. So point is that's how I teach it. And so the story I wanted to tell, it's really a great inspiration, was one of my first students in HLC who actually came in with this goal of being able to create the library and then outsource it. A lot of my students come in and they're like, yeah, I want to outsource at some point, or I'm not going to do that. I like to do it myself, which is like what you and I mostly do. But this particular student came in and she was like, listen, I'm running a busy practice. I already am getting, some referrals. I want to not be dependent on referrals. I want a blog.
Yep.
And I want to be on LinkedIn as well. So I'm going to create this blog as you recommended, Jana, and then that'll be my anchor content. Um, the source content is what my former client Kay that I was telling you about used to call it, and then I'll have someone repurpose it from there. So that they're not just pulling things out of thin air, they're pulling things out of the actual thought leadership content that I wrote, right? Meaning
Hmm.
her, my student Naomi is her name. So she's a nervous system regulation coach. And like I said, she has a really busy practice and she just knows that she's not going to have a lot of time for the long run to be showing up online and doing all the things. So she just really wanted to set up like a really sustainable, easeful system. And for her, part of that meant definitely like setting things up so she could outsource and get good results because she's also like me and like a lot of my students, not everybody is as particular, but she's pretty particular about what her content says. She doesn't want it to be like random or not represent her thought leadership. It's very important to her.
Yeah.
So she came into the program. Within 30 days, she had written five of her HLC blog posts. And because I teach a system where you create 12 to 20 pieces of content and then you just stop and repurpose them. And you might occasionally still write new ones, but you don't have to write new blog posts constantly. Um, and within 60 days, she had finished nine of them. And with her first nine HLC style posts, she went and she hired a repurposing company, a repurposing manager. And I'm actually going to be interviewing that person in my micro audio summit in about a month, which will be really fun because I'll get to get the details of all of this that happened like after, Naomi graduated from my program and started working with the content repurposing manager. And they were able to start repurposing different pieces of micro content from her nine blog posts on the regular on LinkedIn to create her content. And they set her up with a outreach like system on LinkedIn as
Hmm.
well that was driven by that content. And she's doing really well over there. So she was brand new on LinkedIn, and within the first like 90 days, her following grew really quickly. Again, I'm going to get all the details when I interview her content repurposing manager next month. And then in the second 90-day stint that they did together, she started getting inquiries from people about her services from her
Nice.
LinkedIn content. Yeah. So first 90 days on LinkedIn was just kind of getting established and starting to grow followers and grow. I think they're not called followers over there. I don't know anything about it. But the connections, I think, and getting her body of work, starting to circulate on the platform and reaching out to people. And then the second 90-day stint is where she started to really see that the fruits of her labor, or really her content repurposing manager's labor, and the labor she had done by writing her nine blog posts. And she has actually written three more since then as well. So now she has 12 for that content repurposing manager to cycle through and use for her LinkedIn content. And she will write a few more as well, but that's pretty much like all she needed to do to be able to hand it off to her content repurposing manager and start getting content that A, sounded like her and reflected her thought leadership, and B, started attracting clients, 90 days in the second 90-day stint that they were working together. So that is, in my opinion, how you go about the best way, in my opinion, to go about delegating or outsourcing some of your social media content without it sounding not like you, without it being cringy, without you being
Yeah.
embarrassed of it. And actually, really, at the end of the day, the most important thing is to make sure that you're not just paying somebody for you to be visible, but that you're paying somebody to actually do work that's going to get you clients.
Yeah.
Because if someone just makes stuff up that's not your thought leadership, that's just getting you visible in front of people, but it's not really getting your ideas in front of people, and it's not building that trust and demand for your offers that you really need if you want to actually be seeing ROI and paying clients from that content.
Especially from social media.
Right.
So
Yeah.
a big difference here, if you're watching and listening, is a platform like Pinterest is supposed to drive people to your site where you do your conversions. But in
Yep.
most cases, social media content is broken down in a way where it does the conversions.
Yeah, or at least begins the conversion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
at least begins a conversation, whether in DMs or email or whether they book a call with you. Like
Mhm.
historically, that has been what has occurred. Time
Yeah.
after time, I see people will DM me about, a YouTube video that they watched, and then they're like, hey, I was thinking about joining the academy. Is it a good fit for me? I'm X, Y, and Z. And that begins the conversation
Yeah.
because of a piece of content they saw on a social media platform.
Yeah.
Like it or not, YouTube is considered social media, I think.
There's a social aspect to it.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Much more than Pinterest.
much more than Pinterest. Um,
And we
yeah,
say that because they're both search engines,
yeah, they both are search.
primarily, but yeah, YouTube has a lot more of that social
Yeah.
element.
So, you'll see that with TikTok, you'll see that with Instagram, you'll see it with LinkedIn.
Yep.
LinkedIn is really interesting to me. I'm definitely interested in hearing more about Naomi's repurposing piece
Yeah.
and from that repurposing manager. So when that goes live, wherever that goes live, let me know
For
because
sure. Yep. It'll be
I want
my
to hear
micro,
more.
yeah, my micro audio summit that's coming out in May. We'll have that interview,
I love that. I
but
love that
I'll give
because
you a heads up on it.
right now I've trained my bot inside of ChatGPT to take my transcripts and then I'm turning those into pieces of content. So bite-sized pieces of
Nice.
content. So it's the exact transcript that I give the bot. It then takes my words and we as in me and the bot then create
Hmm.
threads and LinkedIn posts and Facebook posts and Instagram carousel posts. And like I'm really starting to use social media more lately,
Hmm.
but it needs to be fast and I don't want it to be something that's going to take me forever. So what I've been focusing on is like with these lives that we do, starting to take Riverside and like uploading it there and clipping
Hmm.
out pieces of it for video. So I don't actually have to refilm a reel. So I really like this repurposing strategy,
Hmm.
taking one piece of content and then consistently repurposing it. Now, one of my
Yep.
big questions is how many, like, does she come up with like different angles that the repurposing person can use? Does she
Hmm.
give them like a brief, here's a piece of content and here's 12 angles.
I don't think so. I think the repurposing person can find the angles in the blog
Mhm.
post. Um, so that's one of the things about writing. One of the reasons why I teach blog writing the way I teach it inside of
Mhm.
HLC is because I developed this system for myself and for my client and
Yeah,
clients that I also helped during that first era, like the done for you work era of my business, right?
yeah.
And so we write blog posts in a way that they're very rich with a lot of detail. They are very structured in some ways so that there will be obvious places where you can kind of grab pieces of content from.
Mhm.
Not overly. It's like that's not like our first thought when we're thinking about structuring them, but just the way that I have them structured because of the HLC outlines that they use, the strategic outlines
Mhm.
that my students use, to either write the posts themselves or to draft them with the GPTs that are inside my program. They come out with like a lot of detail, and we also flesh them out using like a what I call my thought leadership checklist. So by the time you end up like doing a post the HLC way, it ends up being pretty like long, but not long in like a boring way, long and also very compelling, and people want to keep reading it. But there's a lot of little pieces that can be pulled out for micro content. So I think the repurposing manager is responsible for that part. Um, I do teach my students how to identify the angles and the gems because most of them are doing their own repurposing, at least in the beginning.
Yeah,
Because even though they're setting themselves up to be able to hire someone, the first person they're hiring to do their repurposing is themselves, right?
yeah,
So, like, they have to be able to do that piece of it like quickly and easily too,
yeah,
until they have the resources to outsource. Some of them, like Naomi as an example, and she's not the only one. She's just the one. She was like the first person that really like executed on this in the program a while ago. She was ready right away to outsource, but not everyone comes in and has the outsourcing resources immediately. So,
yeah. Nice.
yeah.
I have so much content, honestly. I just need like a whole day a month to just sit down and run it through my bot and then do content repurposing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I
So,
mean, I think that's where you and I both have a little bit more time to do our own content repurposing if we want to. And we also both, to some degree, teach it.
yeah.
And so it makes sense for us to be doing ours. But like Naomi is an example of someone, and there's lots of people in my program who are like this, who most of their calendar every week is booked with clients.
Hmm.
And during the time that they have to themselves for like, doing things that aren't client work, they want to have like time for deep thinking,
Yeah.
and thinking about their clients and making notes about their clients. And even if they have time to do like the marketing, they'd rather be writing,
Hmm.
and again thinking about their clients and identifying like what stories they could tell from their client sessions and things like that, rather than being the one that runs it through the bot,
Yeah.
and schedules the content with the graphic and all that kind of stuff. That's where you can outsource. You don't do that because it doesn't like, and I don't honestly do that a lot. I go through phases where I do, but I don't do it a lot. I am right now actually, but um, because again, you and I like to do it. We're good at
Mhm.
it. We're fast at it. And it's part of what we teach. So it's kind of like, I don't know, but I'll speak for myself. I want to keep my finger on the pulse of doing it because I want to be able to, I want to be able to teach it. And so I want to be able
Yeah.
to do it. Um, and then for you, you are more, we've talked about this before, your main offer is a more leveraged offer, and you are a content creator. Like that is part of your job, essentially, how
Yeah.
you structure your days and your weeks and your months, right?
So one thing that I am starting to do more frequently is I have a couple scheduling tools that I use, and with those, I basically have them open and I have the bot open. So I'm doing all of this on a Tuesday because Tuesdays are my content days.
Yep.
And I sit down and I film the content, I take the outlines, I plug them into the bot. And right now it's only generally 1 to 2 pieces of content, 1 to 2 transcripts a week. And what I've just started doing again, and I used to do this heavily, but I would do it manually. I wasn't using my bot that I created, the pin bot. Um, I now plug the transcripts in and give it a prompt. So I want 5 threads, 2 Instagram posts. They need to be a Instagram reel caption and a carousel.
Mhm.
And then I'm asking for like repurposing of that content for Facebook. So
Mhm.
format one of these for Facebook, format one of these for LinkedIn. And then I have my schedulers open and I schedule threads in LinkedIn and buffer, and then Instagram stuff goes in Tailwind. Um, and then I'm like done. And I do so much of it for that one piece of content that I don't have to touch it again for like 5 weeks.
Right, exactly. And that's great. They hold the whole batching thing is like if you can't or don't want to right now or outsource or delegate it, having it like batching is probably like the next best way to be the most efficient. Is my thing, can you hear my thing still or is it
Yeah,
okay now? Okay.
no, you're fine.
So that makes a lot of sense. Um, but yeah, those are two of the thoughts that I had about delegating. One is having a brand book that not only reflects your colors and visuals and things like that, but also and Canva templates and stuff, but also adding to your brand book essentially and giving some guidelines about your writing style. You can get as detailed or as not, but the more detailed you can be, the better you're going to get results, from someone that you're asking to create content for you. We
Yeah.
think a lot these days about giving ChatGPT a lot of details to get back content. We say garbage in, garbage out, right?
Yep.
But it's the same when you're hiring a human to do it. whether that means that they're writing the captions or generating some captions with ChatGPT and then making sure they make sense to a human and scheduling them for you and doing that piece of things.
Yeah.
Um, and then there were a couple other, let's see. Yeah, I guess we covered everything. The only other thing I was going to say about outsourcing without getting cringe or being embarrassed of what your content people are putting out there for you is that one strategy I've found to be good is like if the person is creating, let's say, 30 posts in a month,
Mm-hmm.
I can go through and basically remove any that I don't want if
Yep.
needed. If I want to give feedback on why so that they can do better next time, that's always a good idea to be iterating, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then banking the captions or whatever it is that people are creating because you can reuse them. So I actually right now have my VA over time in her extra time, essentially. She's working on a project to create a new bank of content for me because I used to be really good about banking my shorter form content as Asana and I've gotten away from it. So I'm having her go through and just bank all of my short form content because the way I teach things in HLC and the way I do them is that any month where I want to have a lot of content, what I'll usually do is I'll dip into a blog post that I wrote a long time ago that I haven't used in a while and just use that as the content for that month.
Mm-hmm.
Now, right now, I'm not really repurposing Pinterest blog posts anymore because I don't have an offer that I actively sell. I mean, I do have Pinterest with purpose, but it's not my active offer.
Yeah.
It's more on it's automated, it has an automated funnel, but which actually is going away, but that's another story for another day. Yes, Jana is taking down a high converting funnel. Why is she doing that? Let's talk about it next week. But basically, let's say I wrote a blog post that is related to HLC that for which the call to action is to buy, enroll in high leverage content maybe 8 months ago and I haven't cycled through it, I can take that blog post and either myself or someone on my team, if I ask them to, if I'm going through a season where have a person doing it, can go through and divide that up into, not divide it, like break it into smaller pieces of micro content, schedule them all out for that month or that 2 week period or 3 week period or whatever it is. What was my point? Oh, I know, but you only need to do that so many times. Then you have a bank of micro content that you can use and I can just reuse it. If 6 months go by and I use the exact same caption
Mm-hmm.
on a new graphic on Instagram,
No one's
no
gonna.
problem. Right. It's like, and even if they do notice, I don't have a problem with that because I think people like repetition. I don't think people find it boring. I think they actually find it comforting and they trust you that way. And it's
It's like
never
a brain
something that,
tingler of like, I've heard this somewhere before. Have I heard this from Jana before? They're not thinking to themselves, "Ah, Jana said this 6 weeks ago on a
exactly.
Tuesday."
Yeah. And if they are, then they're not my person anyway,
No.
but yeah, I mean, I think most people, if they see me I wrote something like they probably either go, oh, that's really interesting. I hadn't seen that from her before because they just had never noticed it before, even though I've said it
Mhm.
before. Or they look at it and they go, oh yeah, she said that before. That's her thing. That's
Mhm.
what that's basically like how you become known for certain concepts and stuff. So yeah, that's a whole nother conversation for another day. And we've had it before too,
Mhm.
here and on Clubhouse. But yeah, I think so right now the last strategy I wanted to share is if you are outsourcing to someone, bank the content that they create that you do like so you can use it
Yeah.
again. Um, and you don't have to use everything that they create for you again if you didn't like it that much. But if there are some that you're getting that you do think is, meeting and exceeding your standards, then keep a record of it and use it again. You don't have to only use it once.
Yeah.
So,
That's good. I need to do that.
hmm,
I right now just have everything in my scheduler tools and I will pull them back out, but it's not organized at all. And there's no telling, like,
yeah.
where is this from? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. And,
So, yeah, I could
again,
use definitely a better system on the back end of like keeping it.
maybe, but I was just talking to a student about this morning. She's in my JPass offer, which means that it's like a subscription that I offer to HLC students where they can get more time with me. And we were
Mm.
talking about this morning where wait, what? Oh, I just lost my train of thought. Oh, we were talking about like the 4 stages of learning,
Hmm.
which is it starts with you don't know what you don't know. So it's unconscious incompetence. Like you don't realize that you don't know, basically. You're
Yeah.
unconsciously incompetent about something. You don't know how to do it, but you also don't even notice that you don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
And then one day you notice that you don't know how to do it. And you're like, oh, and now you're consciously incompetent. You're like, oh, I don't know how to do that. And I should. I'd like, I want to do it, but I don't know how. And then you learn it. So then you become consciously competent and you have to pay attention to doing it because you're learning how to do it. You're like, okay, step one, I do it. Step two, I
Mhm.
do it. Step three, I do it. Okay, cool. I did it. It's great. And then the fourth step is unconscious competence, where now you don't even have to follow the steps anymore because your brain is automatically following those steps because you taught yourself the thing, right? And I think a lot of the times when we have these conversations, Heather, one of us, you and I, are like, oh, I don't do that yet. And it's like, well, but you kind of do. It's just that you're already like unconsciously competent. Like you already are doing it. You don't have to follow the process anymore.
It's so
You
funny.
know?
I love those steps. I need to pull these out and make that just a reel.
Yeah, I don't know if people would be like, I don't know if their eyes would roll back in their heads, but yeah, it's how you learn something, and it's why when we teach things to people, um, we teach frameworks and steps so that not only can they follow them to do it well, but
Yeah.
also they're learning them so that they will be able to do it well without having to like, eventually they won't have to follow the framework anymore because their brain will automatically do it for them.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm on a tangent. My point is that even if you don't have a system for that, like, you're pumping out a lot of great content and you don't really have to think that much about the system anymore. It just happens naturally.
Yeah. Well, one can dream about showing up everywhere in a really good way, but it's just not possible like all the time.
I don't know. You do a pretty good job. I don't know anyone who does a better job than you about showing up in a lot of places really powerfully.
I don't feel like I do a very good job though. I'm just like throwing it spaghetti at the wall over here.
But that's the thing is like once you get to your stage in business, you can throw spaghetti at the wall because you already know what sticks. So you're only throwing the spaghetti that you know is going to stick because your
No,
brain already learned it.
that's
Your
true.
brain knows what your audience wants. Your brain knows how to format when you're writing something that's going to be persuasive. You know what I mean?
I honestly wish I felt that way about those emails I need to write.
Oh, well, yeah, there's that. We
There's
need to get
40
you
more
writing
of
more
them.
emails. Yes. Yeah, we need to do that for you. Get the emails going.
I
Yeah.
hate it so much. Well, I think we have given people enough so they are feeling empowered to not feel cringe. So let's tell them what we're talking about next week because
Okay.
that's our shtick.
Yeah, while you're looking for next week, I'll go through them really quick. We talked about having a brand book that not only has your visuals, like Heather was talking about, but also has things about your values and your core messaging stuff so that people know what those are when you're trying to get them
Mhm.
to write content for you. So they're not just pulling stuff out of thin air, people.
Yep.
Taking that a step further, we talked about having a capsule content library, which I think having it on your blog is the best place for repurposing, but that's just me. That's why I
Hmm.
teach it that way in HLC. We talked about my student Naomi, who wrote 9 HLC style posts that were very detailed and conversion friendly so that her content manager could now start cycling through those for all her LinkedIn content. And she's growing there and getting clients, which is great. And then we talked about, and she's not cringe when she sees what they wrote because they're using her thought leadership from her blog. Um,
Yep.
and then we talked about banking, the results that you get from your outsourcing team members, whether they're, your internal VA or an agency or whatever, so you can use them again in the future. So those were some different strategies we talked about how to get help with social media without getting stuff back that's cringy, that embarrasses you, that doesn't feel like it's you or represents your thought leadership. What are we talking about next week?
Nice. We are talking about whether you should essentially work for free with your clients in order to get testimonials
Mhm.
as a new
Yeah.
service provider or a coach.
Yep. Random
We
pivot
have
there,
thoughts.
but yeah, we were inspired for this topic, so we have a lot of opinions about it and are going to share.
Yeah. So we always want to make sure we're coming at these conversations in a way that is productive for, you know, you as a service provider, but also the person that you're serving and making sure that we all are, benefiting from it. So we're going to come to you with that conversation same time, same place next week, 12 Eastern Standard Time. In the meantime, I hope you guys have a fantastic week. Bye for now.
Bye.
Alrighty,
Okay.
we're out.